The room was made of light, not walls covered in light, but actual light shaped into surfaces that seemed solid until Sarah looked at them too closely. Then they became transparent, showing the endless darkness of space beyond. She tried not to look too hard at anything here. It made her head hurt. "This is insane," whispered beside her. The had studied 300 alien cultures, but nothing had prepared him for this. "We're standing in a place that shouldn't exist, waiting to be judged by things that look like they're made of stars." Sarah nodded but said nothing. As a commander in Earth's diplomatic corps, she had learned when to keep quiet. Right now felt like one of those times. The ethereal judges floated before them. There were 7 of them, each one a being of pure energy shaped vaguely like a humanoid form. They glowed with different colors: blue, gold, violet, green, white, red, and silver. The one in the center, radiating brilliant white light, seemed to be in charge. Its voice echoed inside Sarah's mind rather than through her ears. "I am Terminus," the white judge said. "We have summoned humanity to answer for crimes against cosmic order." "Crimes?" Sarah's voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. "With respect, we don't understand. Humanity has followed every galactic treaty. We've respected territorial boundaries. We've participated in trade agreements and diplomatic exchanges according to established protocols." "The crimes are not of law," another judge said, this one glowing deep violet. "They are of existence, of influence, of contagion." Stepped forward. "Contagion. Are we accused of spreading disease?" "Worse," Terminus replied. "You spread change." The space around them shifted. Suddenly they were looking at a holographic projection, though calling it that felt inadequate. It was more like reality itself had been rewritten to show them something else. They saw a planet, blue and green, with 3 small moons. Cities covered 1 continent, geometric and precise. "This is Prime," the Golden Judge explained. "A mining world. The species achieved space travel 7,000 years ago. They built their civilization on efficiency. Every member of their society had a designated function. Workers mined resources. Engineers designed tools. Administrators managed logistics. For 7,000 years, their system remained stable." The image zoomed in, showing massive underground tunnels where millions of beings worked. They looked vaguely insect-like, with 4 arms and smooth gray skin. They moved in perfect coordination, extracting precious metals from the rock without wasting a single movement. "Then humans arrived," Terminus said, and the image shifted forward in time. Now there were humans among a small group wearing Earth engineering uniforms, brought in as consultants to improve mining efficiency by 12% according to a contracted agreement. Sarah watched as one human, a woman with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, approached a worker. The worker had stopped moving, one of its arms hanging at an odd angle. The human touched its shoulder gently and spoke. They didn't respond, just stood there. That worker's designation was Drone 7743 Mining Sector 44, the violet judge said. It had damaged its primary excavation limb. By protocol, it should have reported to recycling for biological component recovery. Recycling looked horrified. You mean they would have killed it? Efficiency, the golden judge replied without emotion. A damaged unit is less efficient than harvesting its biological materials to create a new unit. On the projection, the human woman was now guiding the worker away from the mining face. Other continued working around them, perfectly synchronized, ignoring the broken one. The human took the worker to a medical station that humans had set up for their own use. The human's name was Jessica Park, Terminus continued. An engineer, not a medical professional, but she used emergency first aid training to stabilize Drone 7743's damaged limb. She then filed a formal complaint with administrators, demanding improved safety protocols and medical care for injured workers. The projection showed Jessica arguing with the administrator, her face flushed with anger. Her hands moved in passionate gestures, while the administrator simply stared at her with compound eyes that betrayed no emotion. The complaint was, of course, the Red Judge said, law did not recognize workers as having medical rights. They were biological tools, not persons. So what happened? Sarah asked, though part of her already knew. The image fast-forwarded. Jessica was now teaching other humans on Prime. They learned to spot injured workers, to pull them aside, to treat their wounds. They ignored this behavior at first, but then something changed. A young, smaller than the others, approached the human medical station. Its designation appeared in glowing text, Drone 9201 Mining Sector 44. It stood at the entrance, motionless, for 16 minutes before Jessica noticed it. When she approached, the extended one trembling arm. The limb wasn't damaged, but it was covered in what looked like chemical burns. "Why didn't you report to recycling?" Jessica asked in the projection, speaking slowly and accented. The answer came in a whisper that the projection somehow amplified. "Wanted, not die." Sarah felt tears pricking her eyes. Beside her had gone very still. That was the first time in 7,000 years that a worker expressed individual desire, Terminus said. The infection had begun. The projection accelerated. More came to the human medical station. They began asking questions. Why do humans rest? Why do humans call each other by individual names? Why do humans stop mining when someone is hurt? The human engineering team, just 43 people trying to do a job, answered honestly. Because we get tired. Because we're individuals. Because we care about each other. Within 2 years, workers across the planet had begun using names instead of designations. They formed social groups. They demanded rest periods. They refused to report injured colleagues for recycling. The carefully maintained efficiency of 7,000 years dropped by 40% in 6 months. The government declared a state of emergency, the Green Judge said. They attempted to suppress what they called the human contamination. But it was too late. The workers had remembered they were people. The projection showed riots, protests, standing together in groups, refusing to work until their demands were met. Recognition as individuals, medical care, fair treatment. The humans had been evacuated by then, removed for their own safety. But the change they had triggered couldn't be stopped. Within a generation, civilization transformed completely, Terminus said. They established individual rights, created democratic systems, built hospitals. Their mining production never recovered to previous levels, but their technological innovation increased by 700%. They developed new methods, new ideas, new ways of thinking. They became something fundamentally different from what they had been. The projection faded. Sarah stood once again in the room of light, facing the 7 judges. "This is but one example," the Silver Judge said. "We have documented 247 similar incidents across the galaxy. Wherever humans go, civilizations change. Not through conquest, not through force, through something far more insidious." "You make others feel," Terminus said, and somehow his voice carried weight that made Sarah's chest tight. "You extend care to beings who are not your kin, not your species, not your responsibility. You treat strangers as though their pain matters to you personally. This behavior spreads like a virus. Other species observe it, experience it, and begin to replicate it. Their societies restructure around emotional priorities rather than logical ones. Stability crumbles. Order dissolves." "You're saying we're guilty of being kind." His voice shook with anger. "Of treating people like they matter." "We are saying," the Violet Judge replied, "that you are remaking the galaxy in your image without permission, without control, without understanding the consequences. You wield empathy like a weapon, and it destroys everything it touches." "Destroys," Sarah found her voice. "They aren't destroyed, they're thriving." "They are unrecognizable," Terminus corrected. 7,000 years of cultural evolution erased in 3 generations. Multiply this by 247 civilizations and counting. Do you understand the magnitude? In every direction that humanity expands, diversity dies. Not the diversity of species, but the diversity of thought, of social structure, of values. Every civilization you touch becomes more like you. In 10,000 years, if left unchecked, the entire galaxy will be culturally human. This is extinction through assimilation. The weight of the accusation settled over Sarah like a heavy blanket. She thought about Jessica Park, just trying to help an injured worker, about the human engineers teaching that their lives had value, about the 43 people who never intended to start a revolution. "What would you have us do?" she asked quietly. "That," Terminus said, "is what we must decide. We have 3 options before us. First, quarantine humanity within your home solar system, forbidden from contact with other species. Second, mandatory emotional regulation for all humans who leave Earth, suppressing the empathy that makes you so dangerous. Third, extermination, if we determine that humanity poses an existential threat to galactic diversity." Made a sound like he'd been punched. Sarah kept her face carefully neutral, though her heart was racing. "We will present further evidence," the Red Judge said. "You will hear the full scope of human impact. Then we will render judgment." The Blue Judge spoke for the first time, its voice like distant thunder. "Understand that we do not judge with malice. We are the keepers of cosmic balance. We have maintained order for 4 billion years across 1,000 galaxies. If humanity is a threat to that order, we will respond accordingly." "How long do we have?" Sarah asked. "The tribunal will reconvene in 1 solar cycle," Terminus replied. "Prepare yourselves to witness what you have done." The room of light began to dissolve around them. Sarah felt herself being pulled backward, reality snapping back into place. The last thing she heard was Terminus's voice, somehow sad and ancient and absolutely certain. "Prepare to see why the galaxy fears human kindness." Then there was only darkness, and the sound of breathing heavily beside her, and the terrible knowledge that humanity was on trial for the crime of caring too much. The room reformed around them exactly 1 solar cycle later, though Sarah felt like no time had passed at all. One moment she was in darkness, the next she stood once more in the chamber of light with beside her. He looked tired. She probably did too. Neither of them had slept well, knowing what was coming. "The tribunal resumes," Terminus announced. "Today we present evidence of the broader infection." This time, multiple projections appeared simultaneously around them. Sarah turned slowly, trying to take in all the images at once. Each showed a different world, a different species, a different story of change. "The Empire," the Golden Judge said, gesturing to a projection on the left. "A warrior culture that has existed for 12,000 years. Their entire civilization is built on military hierarchy and conquest. Every trains for combat from birth. They measure worth by victories in battle. They have conquered 47 star systems through force." The image showed tall, muscular beings with crimson skin and bone ridges along their skulls. They moved with predatory grace, every gesture controlled and purposeful. A massive arena filled the center of the projection, where 2 fought with bladed weapons while thousands watched. "Then humans established diplomatic relations," the Violet Judge continued. "You sent ambassadors, as is your custom. Among them was a human child." Sarah's stomach dropped. She knew this story. It had been all over Earth's news feeds 5 years ago. The projection zoomed in on a small human girl, maybe 7 years old, standing in the embassy gardens. Her name was Lily, daughter of ambassador. No relation to Sarah, but she remembered the name. The girl was drawing with colored chalk on the stone pathway, creating elaborate pictures of flowers and butterflies. A young approached, maybe the equivalent of an adolescent. His bone ridges were still small, his movements uncertain. He watched the girl draw for several minutes before speaking. The projection provided translation subtitles. "Why do you create images of weak things?" the young asked. "Flowers die easily, butterflies cannot fight." Lily looked up at him and smiled. They're pretty. I like pretty things. Pretty things have no purpose in battle. I don't like battles, Lily said simply. Battles hurt people. I like things that make people happy. The sat down across from her, his large frame folding awkwardly to the ground. Happiness is not important. Victory is important. That sounds sad, Lily replied. She pushed a piece of blue chalk across to him. Do you want to draw with me? Drawing makes me happy. The projection showed the young staring at the chalk for a long moment. Then, slowly, he picked it up. His first attempt was crude, just rough lines. But Lily encouraged him, showing him how to blend colors, how to create shapes. They drew together for an hour. That's name was, the Red Judge said, son of a high-ranking military commander. What happened next spread throughout their empire like wildfire. The images fast-forwarded, returned to the embassy gardens again and again. He brought other young. They learned to draw, to create art instead of practicing combat forms. The adults dismissed it at first as childish behavior, but then did something unprecedented. When he reached the age of his first trial combat, a ritual where young proved their worth by fighting captured prisoners to the death, refused. He stood in the arena and spoke words that no had spoken in 12,000 years. I will not kill to prove my value. I have value because I exist. I learned this from humans. The projection showed the shock rippling through the crowd. His father stood in rage. The prisoner, a captured alien from a border skirmish, cowered in the corner of the arena, clearly expecting death. Was executed for his refusal, Terminus said quietly. But his words were not forgotten. Within a year, 300 young refused their trial combats. Within 5 years, entire generations questioned the purpose of constant warfare. The empire began to fracture. 2 of their conquered systems rebelled successfully because soldiers refused to attack civilian populations. Their military culture, unchanged for 12,000 years, collapsed in a single generation. Because a little girl taught someone how to draw, his voice was barely a whisper. Because a little girl showed someone that there were things worth doing besides fighting, the Green Judge replied. Because she demonstrated that creating beauty had value. Because she treated a warrior trained to kill as a friend worth having. This is what humans do. This is the infection. Another projection brightened, showing a world of gleaming metal cities under a purple sky. The hegemony of, the Blue Judge announced. Perhaps the most stable civilization in recorded history. 10,000 years without war, without crime, without conflict of any kind. How? Sarah asked, though she suspected she wouldn't like the answer. Complete emotional suppression, Terminus replied. Every receives chemical regulation from birth. They feel no anger, no jealousy, no passion, no grief. They are peaceful because they are incapable of the emotions that lead to violence. Their society functions with perfect efficiency. The projection showed the people. They looked almost human, actually, with pale skin and dark hair. But their faces were completely blank, their movements mechanical. They walked through their cities like automatons, never touching, never laughing, never showing any sign of feeling anything at all. Then humans opened an embassy, the Silver Judge said, and human children played in the embassy gardens. Sarah watched as human families moved through a carefully maintained green space within the embassy grounds. Children ran and screamed with joy. Parents hugged them. A teenage boy cried on his mother's shoulder about something. A young couple kissed under a tree. Normal human behavior, natural human emotions. The people began gathering at the embassy walls. At first just a few, then dozens, then hundreds. They stood silently, watching the humans live. The embassy staff noticed but didn't understand what was happening. They were remembering, Terminus said. Their species evolved with emotions just like yours, but they had suppressed them for so long that most had forgotten what it felt like to truly feel. Watching humans, something awakened in them. The projection showed a woman, middle-aged by her species standards. She stood at the embassy wall day after day, watching human children play. One day, she didn't take her emotional suppressant dose. The next day, she skipped it again. By the end of the week, she felt something she couldn't name. She had a daughter, a teenager as emotionally blank as all. One evening, the woman approached her daughter and did something that hadn't been done in society for 10,000 years. She hugged her. The daughter stood rigid in her mother's arms, confused and uncertain. But the mother cried, tears streaming down her face, and whispered, "I love you. I'm sorry I never told you before." Within 6 months, 20% of the capital city's population had stopped taking their suppressants, the Violet judge said. The government declared it a plague. They called it human contamination. They tried to quarantine affected individuals to force compliance. But you cannot force people to not feel once they've remembered how. The projections showed chaos, experiencing emotions for the first time in their lives, overwhelmed by feelings they had no context for, joy and rage and love and hatred all mixed together. Families that had coexisted in blank peace for generations suddenly had screaming arguments, but they also had laughter. They also had embraces. They also had tears. Half of the hegemony's worlds have now declared independence, the Red Judge stated. They're building new societies that allow emotion. The other half are desperately trying to maintain the old ways. The hegemony is effectively dead, killed by the sight of human children playing. More projections lit up around them. A species that had practiced ritual slavery for 6,000 years encountered human traders who treated their slaves like people. Within 20 years, the entire practice was abolished after a slave rebellion succeeded. A civilization of pure logic-based philosophers met human artists and started questioning whether art might have value beyond logical analysis. A species that had eliminated their concept of family in favor of collective child-rearing watched human parents with their children and started reforming their entire social structure. Story after story, world after world, each one the same pattern. Humans arrived with no intention of conquest. They simply existed as they always had, treating others with kindness, expressing emotions freely, caring about strangers. And everywhere they went, civilizations that had been stable for thousands of years began to change. "Do you see now?" Terminus asked. "This is not isolated incidents. This is a pattern of behavior that fundamentally alters everything you touch. You don't conquer with weapons. You conquer with empathy, and it's more devastating than any war." Was shaking his head. "These species chose to change. We didn't force anyone." "Did you not?" the Golden Judge challenged. "When a slave meets someone who treats them as human, do they truly have a choice to return to slavery unchanged? When a warrior sees that creation has value, can they continue killing without question? When an emotionally dead person remembers how to feel, can they choose to forget? You force change by offering alternatives that are too compelling to refuse." "That's not force," Sarah argued. "That's just showing people there are other ways to live." "And in doing so, you erase their existing ways," Terminus countered. "The efficiency culture is gone. The warrior tradition is gone. The peace through suppression is gone. 700,000 years of combined cultural evolution across these species erased, made obsolete by human influence. How is this different from genocide? You kill not the people but their entire way of existence." The room fell silent. Sarah struggled to find an argument, but the weight of the evidence was crushing. They had changed so much, helped so many, but at what cost? "There is one more case we must present," the Blue Judge said quietly. "The most recent and perhaps the most damning." A new projection appeared, larger than all the others. It showed a battlefield, smoke and fire everywhere. Sarah recognized the armor of the collective, a species humanity had been at war with for 6 years over disputed territory in the Outer Rim. "The Battle of Carthage Station," breathed. "I know this one." "Then you know what happened," Terminus said. The projection showed the final hours of the battle. Human and allied forces were pinned down, taking heavy casualties. An assault unit had broken through the defensive lines and was systematically eliminating survivors. The projection focused on a young human medic, barely out of training. His name tag read. David was trying to save a wounded human soldier when energy fire struck nearby, throwing him to the ground. When he looked up, he saw a soldier lying 3 meters away. The alien had been caught in the same explosion. Its armor was breached, green blood pooling beneath it. David's squad leader was shouting at him to fall back. They were advancing. They had maybe 60 seconds before the position was overrun. David looked at the dying soldier, then at his own wounded comrade, then back at the... He made his choice. David grabbed his medical kit and ran toward the enemy soldier. Energy fire screamed past him. His squad leader screamed at him to get back, but David dropped to his knees beside the and started working. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, sealing the breach in the armor, injecting coagulants, stabilizing the worst of the damage. The soldiers' eyes, all 4 of them, focused on David with confusion. They didn't have a concept of helping enemies. Their culture was built on collective victory or collective death. Individual lives meant nothing. Why would an enemy help? David worked for 45 seconds until his squad leader physically dragged him away. They evacuated just as they overran the position. The forces found their wounded soldier, stabilized by human hands. That soldier's designation was Unit 743 Omega, the Silver Judge said. It survived and was returned to the collective. It filed a report describing what had happened. The report was flagged as a malfunction, assumed to be brain damage from the injury. No enemy would behave that way. But the story spread, Terminus continued. Other soldiers heard about it. They started questioning their commanders. Why would an enemy save one of them? What did it mean? They had never encountered mercy before. The projection shifted to show ships, dozens of them, but they weren't attacking. They were broadcasting messages to human space. Unit 743 Omega led a mutiny, the Violet Judge explained. Took control of its entire battalion, refused to continue fighting humans. Other units joined. Within 3 months, 30% of the military was in open rebellion against the collective's central command. They're calling themselves the Individual Movement. They want to end the war. They want to establish individual rights for soldiers. They want to be people instead of units. All because one human medic saved an enemy soldier in the middle of battle, the Red Judge finished. One act of mercy, and an empire begins to crumble. Sarah felt tears on her face but didn't bother wiping them away. What do you want from us? To stop caring? To let people suffer when we can help? To ignore pain and death and injustice because helping might change things? We want, Terminus said slowly, to understand if there is any way your species can coexist with others without remaking them in your image. Because if the answer is no, then we must contain you, for the good of the galaxy. The projections faded. The 7 judges floated in silence, their colored lights pulsing slowly. We will deliberate, Terminus announced. You will have one opportunity to present a defense. Choose your words carefully. The fate of humanity depends on them. The room began to dissolve again. Sarah grabbed his arm. We need to talk to people, she said urgently. Everyone who's been affected by us. We need to hear from them. The judges won't care what we think, replied. They've already decided we're dangerous. Then we need to show them we're not the only ones who get to speak for this, Sarah insisted. These civilizations changed themselves. We just gave them the opportunity. They need to say that. The darkness swallowed them once more. Sarah's last thought before reality snapped back was simple and desperate. They had 72 hours to save humanity from being quarantined, or worse, for the crime of being kind. And she had no idea how to do it. The chamber reformed for the final time. Sarah stood than before, though her hands still trembled slightly. Beside her, looked exhausted but determined. They had spent every minute of their 72 hours preparing for this moment. The tribunal convenes for final arguments, Terminus announced. Humanity may present its defense. Sarah took a breath. With respect to the judges, we request permission to present witnesses. The 7 beings of light pulsed in what might have been surprise. Witnesses, the golden judge asked. This is not a human court. We have presented evidence. You may argue against our interpretation, but we do not require testimony. Nevertheless, said firmly, we have contacted representatives from each civilization you mentioned. They wish to speak. By your own laws of cosmic fairness, don't they have that right? You're deciding the fate of not just humanity, but our relationships with hundreds of species. Shouldn't those species have a voice? The judges conferred silently, their lights flickering in patterns too complex for human eyes to follow. Finally, Terminus spoke. Very well, we will hear from 3 witnesses. Choose carefully. Sarah nodded. She had expected this limitation. We call drone 7743 mining sector 44 of Prime. The space beside them shimmered, and suddenly a stood in the chamber. It looked around with all 4 eyes wide, clearly overwhelmed by the room of light. But when it saw Sarah, its posture relaxed slightly. Please state your name, Sarah said gently. The mandibles clicked together in what might have been a smile. My name is. I chose it myself 3 years ago. Before that, I was drone 7743 mining sector 44. Before that, I was a thing that mined rocks and waited to be recycled when I broke. Tell the judges what happened when you met humans, prompted. Turn to face the 7 beings of light, showing no fear. I damaged my primary excavation limb in a tunnel collapse. By the protocols of my people, I should have reported for biological recycling immediately. I had been taught since birth that damaged units were inefficient, that my purpose was to serve the collective, that individual survival was less important than overall productivity. The paused, its breathing steady. But I was afraid. I had never acknowledged that before. We didn't have a word for afraid. We had optimal and suboptimal, but I was afraid to die. I stood at the entrance to the recycling facility for 2 hours, unable to make myself go in. And then, Terminus asked. Then a human named Jessica found me. She asked what was wrong. I didn't know how to answer. No one had ever asked me what was wrong before. She saw my damaged limb and took me to her medical station. She fixed it. Not because I was valuable to production, but because I was hurt and she couldn't stand to see someone hurt. 4 arms spread wide in an expressive gesture. She asked me my designation, and when I told her, she looked sad. She said I deserved a real name. She suggested, from her ancient language, it means hope. I didn't know what hope was. She explained it was believing things could get better. The judges claim we forced change on your people, Sarah said. Did we? No, replied simply. You gave us permission to change ourselves. For 7,000 years, my people believed we were tools. We believed individual lives didn't matter. But we believed it because no one ever showed us different. When Jessica treated me like a person, when she acted like my pain mattered, when she gave me a name, she didn't force me to be different. She just showed me I already was different. I had just never been allowed to see it. This voice grew stronger. You say our culture is destroyed. I say our culture was a prison. Yes, we're less efficient now. Yes, we produce less ore. But we also produce art and music and poetry. We have families. We have friends. We have hope. 3 months ago, scientists developed a new form of faster-than-light communication that humanity has been trying to crack for decades. We created it because for the first time, we were allowed to think instead of just dig. Tell me, wise judges, is that destruction or growth? Terminus was silent for a long moment. You may believe it is growth, but your species lost 7,000 years of cultural heritage in 3 generations. That heritage is gone forever. Our heritage, said firmly, was treating people like property. I'm glad it's gone. The bowed to the judges and vanished in another shimmer of light. Our second witness said, of formerly of the hegemony. The woman who appeared looked remarkably human, though her skin had a faint blue tint and her eyes were silver. But unlike the emotionally blank in the projections, her face was alive with expression. She was crying before she even spoke. "Forgive me," she said, wiping her eyes. "I still cry at unexpected moments. I'm told this is normal for someone who spent 43 years feeling nothing." "Tell us about your life in the hegemony," Sarah prompted gently. His hands twisted together. "I was born in the capital city. I received my first emotional suppressant injection at 6 months old, every month after that for 43 years. I went to school, learned a profession, worked efficiently. I was assigned a partner for reproduction. We created a child. I raised that child according to protocol. Everything was calm, peaceful, perfect." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I want you to understand I didn't know I was missing anything. You can't miss what you've never had. I looked at my daughter and felt nothing. Not love, not pride, not even recognition that she was mine. She was just another serving her function. And I thought that was normal. I thought that was how life was supposed to be." "What changed?" the Violet Judge asked. "I saw humans," replied. "I worked near the embassy district and I started walking past the embassy gardens on my way home. I told myself it was just a more efficient route, but I was lying. I wanted to see them. The humans. They were so strange. They touched each other constantly. They smiled for no apparent reason. They cried when they were hurt or sad or sometimes even when they were happy. They yelled during arguments and then embraced afterward. It was chaotic and inefficient, and I couldn't stop watching." She looked directly at Terminus. "One day I saw a human mother with her daughter. The daughter had fallen and scraped her knee. The mother picked her up and held her so tight and she was crying almost as much as the child. She kept saying, 'It's okay, I'm here, I love you, you're safe,' over and over, and something inside me broke." Tears streamed down his face. "I went home that night and I looked at my daughter. Her name was 17 years old. I had birthed her, fed her, taught her protocols, but I had never once told her I loved her. I had never once held her just because I wanted to. I had never once asked how she felt." "So you stopped taking your suppressants," the Blue Judge stated. "Yes, and it was terrifying. Feeling emotions for the first time as an adult is like being hit by a wave you never saw coming. I experienced 43 years of accumulated love for my daughter all at once, but also 43 years of grief for the time we lost, rage at the government that took our emotions away, fear about what would happen next, joy at finally feeling alive. All of it all at once, overwhelming and beautiful and painful." His voice steadied. "I went too. She was still taking her suppressants, still blank and calm. I knelt in front of her and I said, 'I need to tell you something I should have said every day of your life. I love you. You are my daughter and I love you more than anything and I'm so sorry I never told you before.'" "How did she respond?" Sarah asked softly. "She stared at me. She didn't understand. The words meant nothing to her without the emotions to give them weight, so I hugged her. I held my daughter for the first time in 17 years and I cried. And she just stood there, rigid and confused, but I didn't let go. I held her for 20 minutes and I told her about emotions, about love, about everything she was missing. And I told her it was her choice, but if she wanted, she could stop taking the suppressants too. She could feel." Smiled through her tears. "It took her 3 weeks to decide, but she did. She stopped. And when the emotions hit her, I was there. I held her through the fear and the confusion and the overwhelming rush of everything. And the first thing she said to me when she could speak again was, 'Mom, I love you too.'" The chamber was absolutely silent. "You say humans destroyed the hegemony," continued. "You're right, but the hegemony was already dead. It was a civilization of corpses that didn't know they were corpses. Humans didn't kill us. They reminded us we were alive." She looked at each judge in turn. "Half our worlds have rejected suppressants now. Yes, there's chaos. Yes, there's conflict. People feel anger and hatred for the first time and some don't know how to handle it. But they also feel love and joy and wonder. They feel alive. And every single person who's made this choice did so freely. Humans didn't force us. They just showed us there was another way. Vanish, the silence stretched. Our final witness, Sarah said, Unit 743 Omega of the Collective. The being that appeared was nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and chitinous armor that covered most of its body. Its 4 eyes were deep black, reflecting no light. When it spoke, its voice came out mechanically, translated by a device on its chest. I am Unit 743 Omega. I led the assault on Carthage Station. I was injured in battle. A human medic saved my life instead of letting me die. This action makes no logical sense according to doctrine. Why not? The Red Judge asked. They exist as a collective. Individual units are expendable. We fight until we achieve victory or until all units are destroyed. There is no concept of individual survival. The collective is everything. The unit is nothing. The soldier stood at attention, rigid and formal. When the human David saved my life, I did not understand. We were enemies. I had been killing his people. Logic dictated he should let me die or kill me himself. Instead, he risked his life to save mine. When I was recovered by my battalion and filed my report, command assumed I had sustained brain damage. No rational being would behave this way. But you didn't believe that, said. No, because I remembered his eyes. When David worked to save me, he was afraid. I could see it. He was in danger. His squad leader was screaming at him to retreat. Energy fire was everywhere. He was terrified, but he saved me anyway, not because it was logical, not because I was valuable, because I was suffering and he could help. This mechanical voice somehow conveyed emotion despite its flatness. I had been a unit for 32 years. I had never been afraid. I had never been angry. I had never questioned orders. But after David saved me, I began to question everything. If an enemy would risk death to save me, did that mean my life had value beyond my function? If individual survival mattered to humans even during war, why did it not matter to the... You started a rebellion, Terminus stated. I started asking questions. Others joined me. We did not want to be units anymore. We wanted to be individuals. We wanted our lives to matter. The collective called this malfunction. They tried to eliminate the infected units, but they could not eliminate all of us. Now nearly half the military has joined what humans call the individual movement. They looked directly at the judges. You say humans force change. You are wrong. Humans revealed to us what we already were but had been, the evolved with individual consciousness, but the collective suppressed it for efficiency. We became tools pretending to be alive. David didn't change me. He reminded me that I was already a person, that I had always been a person. I just needed permission to admit it. And now your civilization is in civil war, the Golden Judge pointed out. Fighting, all because of one human's action. No, the replied firmly. Fighting because half of us refuse to be property anymore. The war would have happened eventually. Humans just accelerated it, and when it's over, we will be free. The soldier saluted in a very human gesture and vanished. Sarah stepped forward. You've heard from 3 civilizations. They all say the same thing. We didn't force them to change. We offered them a choice they didn't know they had, and they chose to be free. Freedom, Terminus said slowly. Yes, that is the word that connects all of this. Humans spread the concept of individual freedom wherever they go, but freedom is chaos. Order requires sacrifice. These civilizations sacrificed individual desires for collective stability. It worked for thousands of years. It worked, agreed. But at what cost? They were stable because they treated their own people as disposable tools. They were peaceful because they chemically lobotomized their entire population. They were unified because they eliminated individual thought. You call that order. We call it horror. Your perspective is biased, the Violet Judge said. You value individual freedom above all else. Other civilizations value different things: stability, unity, efficiency. Who are you to say your values are superior? "We're not," Sarah replied. "That's the whole point. We don't go to other worlds and tell them they have to change. We don't enforce our values. We just exist as we are, and we treat others the way we'd want to be treated, with kindness, with dignity, with care. If that causes change, it's because the people choose it." "But the change is always toward human values," the Silver Judge argued. "Every civilization you touch becomes more individualistic, more emotional, more chaotic. You are homogenizing the galaxy." "Or maybe," said quietly, "these aren't human values. Maybe they're just values. Maybe the desire to be treated as a person instead of a tool isn't unique to humans. Maybe the need to feel emotions isn't human contamination. Maybe the wish to have your individual life matter isn't cultural imperialism. Maybe we're just the first species that refuse to suppress these things, and when others see that it's possible, they want it too." His words echoed in Sarah's mind. "You gave us permission to change ourselves." "You call empathy a weapon," Sarah said, looking at each judge in turn. "Fine, it is. It's a weapon that breaks chains, that tears down prisons, that destroys the idea that some beings matter less than others. If that makes us dangerous, then I guess we're dangerous. But I would rather be dangerous and kind than safe and cruel." The 7 judges pulsed in silence, their lights flickering in complex patterns. Finally, Terminus spoke. "We have reached a decision. Humanity will not be quarantined. You will not be regulated. You will not be eliminated." Sarah felt her knees go weak with relief. "However," Terminus continued, "we hereby officially designate human empathy as a weapon of mass emotional reconstruction. This designation is accurate. You do reshape civilizations. You do destabilize ancient orders. You are fundamentally dangerous to the cosmic status." "But," the Blue Judge added, and Sarah heard something new in its voice, something that might have been wonder. "We have also observed something else. Every civilization touched by humans does not just change. They flourish in ways we did not anticipate. Innovation increases. Art appears where there was none. Individuals accomplish things we thought impossible. The communication breakthrough, poetry that moves even us. Philosophers questioning the nature of consciousness. This is unprecedented." "Perhaps," Terminus said slowly, "the galaxy has been too stable for too long. Perhaps order maintained through suppression is not true order at all. Perhaps we have been so focused on preventing change that we failed to see when change was necessary." The Golden Judge's light pulsed warmly. "But there is a condition. Humanity must establish what you call the emotional intelligence core. You will not simply spread empathy and leave civilizations to handle the aftermath alone. You will help them navigate the changes you inspire. You will teach them to manage emotions, to build systems that value both individuals and communities, to find balance between freedom and chaos." "We accept," Sarah said immediately. "There is one more thing," Terminus added. "You asked earlier if we feel empathy." The white light dimmed slightly, and somehow the ancient being seemed smaller, more vulnerable. "We did once. 4 billion years ago, when we were young and flesh instead of energy. We loved. We grieved. We cared for each other and for those we encountered. But we believed that to be cosmic judges we had to be above such feelings. We suppressed them, eliminated them, became pure logic and reason." Terminus's voice grew softer. "Today, watching your species, listening to those witnesses, we wonder if we did not evolve beyond emotion. We wonder if we simply forgot, and we wonder if that forgetting made us blind to what truly matters." The 7 lights brightened together, and Sarah could have sworn she saw tears in the illumination. "Go," Terminus said, "spread your dangerous empathy, remake the galaxy with your impossible kindness, but do it wisely, do it well, because you are right about one thing. Everyone deserves to be treated as a person, even us, even the ancient and powerful, even those who forgot what it means to feel." The chamber dissolved. Sarah and found themselves back on their ship, the stars visible through the viewport. For a long moment neither spoke. then laughed, a sound somewhere between relief and disbelief. "We did it. We actually did it." "We didn't do it alone," Sarah replied. She thought of and Unit 743 Omega, thought of Jessica Park and David and little Lily drawing flowers, thought of every human who had simply been kind when kindness cost them something. "No," agreed, "we never do." Sarah pulled up the communications panel. There was work to do, an entire emotional intelligence core to establish, civilizations to help, changes to guide. It would be difficult, it would be messy. But then again, kindness usually was. She started drafting the first message, her fingers flying over the controls. The galaxy was changing, one act of empathy at a time. And for the first time in 4 billion years, even the ethereal judges were beginning to remember what it felt like to care. Humanity had been declared a weapon of mass emotional reconstruction. They wore the title proudly. After all, if caring about others was a crime, then it was a crime they'd commit gladly, every single day, for as long as there were beings in the universe who needed someone to remind them that they mattered. The ship jumped to faster than light, carrying 2 humans back toward Earth with the weight of the galaxy's future on their shoulders and hope burning bright in their hearts. It was the most human thing imaginable, believing that kindness could change the world and being willing to prove it.